You know that feeling of mild panic when you accidentally hit reply all on a company-wide email? Or that deep, sinking shame when you wave back at someone who is waving to the person behind you? It feels like the end of the world. Well, for a few hundred years, social blunders had slightly higher stakes. Today we're looking at some totally normal things that could get you burned at the stake. Let's get right into it. Number 1 is all about using the wrong hand. If you're part of the 10% of the population that is left-handed, congratulations. In the modern day, this makes you slightly better at baseball and fencing. But a few centuries ago, your preference for using your left hand would have been seen as a major red flag. For generations, left-handedness was associated with all sorts of sinister, spooky stuff. In fact, the word sinister itself comes from the Latin word sinistra, which originally just meant left. In many cultures, the right hand was the hand of God, of righteousness, of good faith and proper greetings. The left hand, therefore, got stuck with all the bad PR. It was seen as unclean, unlucky, and downright deviant. A person who naturally favored their left hand was viewed as backward, their very nature twisting against the correct and moral order of the world. In a climate of extreme paranoia, it wasn't a huge leap for people to see this unnatural preference as a sign of a pact with demonic forces. Your ability to write your name or throw a ball with your left hand could be presented as evidence that you were using that hand to sign contracts with the devil himself. It's the ultimate cosmic design flaw, where simply existing in your natural state made you a prime suspect for supernatural high treason. Coming in at number 2 is that suspicious skin dot. You might call it a beauty mark, a birthmark, maybe just a mole that your dermatologist says is perfectly fine. But in the 16th and 17th centuries, that same little spot of pigmentation could be branded as a witch's teat or a devil's mark. And no, that is not a compliment. According to witch-hunting manuals, these marks were said to be the spot where the devil branded his followers to seal their pact, or where a witch's familiar, her demonic pet, would drink her blood. This meant that literally any blemish on your skin could be weaponized against you. A small mole, a weirdly shaped freckle, a scar, or even just a discolored patch of skin suddenly became Exhibit A in your trial. Professional witch finders would conduct horrifyingly meticulous searches for these marks. Since everybody has something on their skin, they would almost always find what they were looking for. And because these spots were believed to be supernatural, they were also said to be insensitive to pain. An accuser might poke the spot with a pin, and if the accused didn't react correctly, either by flinching too much or not enough, it was considered proof. So that cute little mole on your shoulder. Less Marilyn Monroe and more incontrovertible evidence of my allegiance to the forces of darkness. Next up at number 3 is your fuzzy little roommate, otherwise known as your pet cat. Today, owning a cat makes you a prime candidate for watching compilation videos on the internet for 3 hours straight. In the past, it made you a prime suspect for being a witch. Cats, especially black cats, got a terrible reputation in medieval and early modern Europe. Their nocturnal habits, their silent, slinky movements, and their eyes that seemed to glow in the dark made people deeply suspicious. They weren't seen as cute, fluffy companions. They were seen as agents of chaos in a fur coat. This suspicion was tied to the concept of a familiar. A familiar was believed to be a low-level demon that took on an animal form to serve a witch. It would spy for her, carry out her magical errands, and generally be a spooky little sidekick. While familiars could supposedly be toads, owls, or dogs, the cat became the quintessential witch's pet. So, if you were a solitary person, maybe an elderly woman living on the edge of the village, and you had a beloved cat for company, you were basically fitting a stereotype. Your neighbors wouldn't see a lonely woman and her pet, they'd see a powerful witch and her demonic assistant. Every time your cat brought you a dead mouse, it wasn't a gift, it was delivering a cursed object. Every meow at the door wasn't a request for food, it was a secret report on the village's activities. And your cat's 3 a.m. zoomies? Clearly, it was just returning from a nefarious meeting with its dark master. Number 4 on our list is simply knowing your herbs. Picture the village healer or midwife. For centuries, these were often women who had a deep, practical knowledge of botany and folk medicine, passed down through generations. They knew which plants could soothe a fever, which roots could ease a toothache, and which leaves could help a wound heal. They were, for all intents and purposes, the local pharmacist and doctor rolled into one. And for this, they were both respected and feared. Because in a world without a scientific explanation for how these remedies worked, it all looked a lot like magic. If a healer gave you a poultice that cured your infection, was it medicine or was it a magic potion? If she helped deliver a healthy baby, was it skill or a blessed enchantment? This ambiguity was a double-edged sword. As long as things went well, she was a valued member of the community. But if a remedy failed, if a patient's condition worsened, or if a baby was born unwell, suspicion could fall on her in an instant. Her knowledge of healing could be reframed as a knowledge of cursing. The same herbs used to make a healing tea could, in the minds of accusers, be used to brew a deadly hex. It was a terrifyingly fine line to walk, where being too good at your job could be just as dangerous as failing at it. At number 5, we have a salty conversation. You know, a simple argument. Today, if you have a dispute with your neighbor over their dog digging up your petunias, the worst that usually happens is a few weeks of awkward silence when you pass each other on the sidewalk. But during the witch craze, that same argument could be a death sentence. This was because of a concept called maleficium, the belief that witches could use their powers to cause direct harm to others. And this power was often thought to be triggered by a grudge. So let's set the scene. You get into a heated argument with your neighbor. You shout, maybe you say something you regret, and you storm off. The next day, your neighbor's prize-winning pig gets sick, or a sudden hailstorm flattens his crops. Or his butter churn just won't work. In a pre-scientific world, people didn't always look for logical causes. Instead, your neighbor would remember your argument. His brain would connect the dots. She was angry with me, and now something terrible has happened. She must have cursed me. Your everyday disagreement was now evidence of a supernatural attack. All of a sudden, you're on trial, and your neighbor is tearfully recounting to the court how you gave him a sour look right before his favorite chicken mysteriously stopped laying eggs. At number 6 is the mundane tragedy of your milk going sour. In our modern world of airtight seals and refrigeration, we take food preservation for granted. But a few hundred years ago, keeping food fresh was a constant, desperate battle. There was no understanding of bacteria, yeast, or pasteurization. The processes of milk curdling, butter refusing to churn, beer going flat, or bread failing to rise were complete mysteries. And when people don't have scientific explanations, they tend to invent supernatural ones. Imagine you're a farmer. Your prize cow's milk, which your family depends on, suddenly curdles for 3 days straight. Your butter churn, which has worked for years, now produces nothing but a sloshing, watery mess. Is it bad luck? A change in the cow's feed? Or is it possible that your grumpy neighbor, the one you had that argument with last week, has laid a hex upon your dairy products? For many, the answer was obvious. A witch, they believed, could curse food from afar, magically spoiling it in the pantry or preventing it from ever forming properly. It was the perfect explanation for any kitchen disaster. So that moldy loaf of bread in your cupboard wasn't a sign that the humidity was high. It was a clear signal that a malevolent force was actively trying to ruin your lunch. Number 7 isn't an action or a physical trait. It's just the state of being poor, old, and alone. When you picture the stereotypical witch from a fairy tale, what do you see? It's almost always a crone, an elderly woman, often widowed, who lives by herself on the edge of town. This archetype didn't come from nowhere. It came from a tragic social reality. The primary targets of many witch hunts were women who existed on the margins of society. They were often poor and reliant on the charity of their neighbors to survive. This created a precarious social dynamic. People might give her food or alms out of a sense of duty, but they could also grow to resent her as a burden. If this woman was cranky, suffered from dementia, or just had a sharp tongue, that resentment could easily curdle into suspicion. She didn't fit into the neat patriarchal structure of a wife or daughter under a man's roof. She was an anomaly. If a child got sick after she visited, or if crops failed after she mumbled something under her breath, it was terrifyingly easy for the community to blame the outsider. Accusing her of witchcraft wasn't just about superstition. It was a way to explain away misfortune and, in a horribly cruel way, remove a person who was seen as a social problem. Her real crime wasn't black magic. It was simply being a vulnerable woman in a society that had no idea what to do with her. Finally, at number 8, we have what is perhaps the most absurd and infamous accusation method of all: failing a swimming test. This was known as ordeal by water, and it was a legal and theological process based on some truly spectacular leaps of logic. The theory went like this: water is a pure element blessed by God. Therefore, it would naturally reject anything evil or unholy. An accused witch would be bound, often thumb to opposite toe to prevent actual swimming, and then lowered into a river or lake. Here is where the genius-level, no-win situation comes in. If the accused person sank, the pure water was accepting them as innocent. Congratulations, you were officially not a witch. Of course, you were also at the bottom of a river and in serious need of being rescued before you drowned. But if you floated, that was proof. The pure water was rejecting your wicked soul, pushing you back to the surface. This was seen as undeniable evidence of your guilt, and you would be pulled out of the water to face your final punishment. There was no good outcome. It was a test designed from the ground up to confirm guilt, one way or another. It's like a coin toss where heads, you lose, and tails, you also lose. It stands as one of the most terrifyingly perfect examples of a rigged game in all of human history. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.